Welcome to Car Pervert, I'm Jonny Smith. In this episode, I'm going to look at these two cars. I've already done an in-depth review of the fantastic, quirky, characterful Honda E. If you haven't seen that video already, you should probably look at that video first, and I'll put a link to it here. It's my most successful video. And off the back of that, I thought I would do this. A little comparison between that, the new Honda E, and the car that its designs were based on. This, Honda's first mass-produced success story, the first generation Civic. Listen, before you start saying, don't compare an old car to a new car, that's not fair. This is not really one of those. This is almost a self-indulgent situation. I've got the chance to drive this car. This was one of the very first launch cars for the Civic when it came out in the UK. So it's the one that was featured in the brochure. I've got the brochure in there, I'll show you. And this is more about, I guess, a trip down memory lane, and to remind ourselves that this car was one of the most important cars for Honda. This car was their blockbuster, the first massive selling car rather than a motorbike. This car conquered America and it conquered the UK and Europe. So this is very important. And also this car came out as a city car, an urban vehicle. And now it's a beautiful slice of retro. What's this? Well, Honda is saying the Honda E is a city-centric kind of car, which is why it doesn't have a huge range for an EV. And that is why I'm going to drive these cars back to back today. That and the fact that I absolutely love this and I haven't driven it yet and I really want to. When you look at them from the side, this is when you can really start to see the design language of this, the E, against its grandfather. Now, obviously, this is a far smaller, far lighter, narrower, shorter car than this. So I'm not going to compare it to the nth degree, but check this out. Remember this crease that goes up into what they call a kind of hockey stick style C-pillar? Look at the crease. Look at the C-pillar. You can really see that silhouette. I think they've got right. I know a lot of people criticise this car for being a concept as a two-door and then coming out as a five-door only. But that's because Honda do need to actually sell quite a lot of them to justify their existence. The other thing I want to do when I drive this for the second time on UK soil finally, is I want to see if all the quirks that I like are still as good as I remember. Because we know that the range of this car is not as good as its peers. This, on the other hand, this was the perfect 70s city car. Because of it was small, because it was thrifty and nippy, it was ideal for a time when the oil crisis was kicking off and people didn't want big engine stuff anymore. This was the right car at the right time. Oh, oh man, I've been looking forward to this for ages, to borrow this car. First gen cheeky little Civic. Of course, Civic, the name in itself giving away the fact that it's designed for congested city spaces, town life. So it's really responsive. This is a 4-speed manual. You could buy it, and I remember as a kid seeing the badge on the back as an automatic, but it was called a Honda-matic. But this is the more desirable manual gearbox. But just immediately you realise it's really roomy in here. Look at my legroom. There's a lack of a centre console. It's a nearly flat floor car. It's just very open, very thin pillars, because of course it's old and possibly not as safe in an accident. And you know the other thing is? The other thing is, it smells of my grandma's house, and I really mean that in a nice way. My grandma's house has a very distinctive, clean smell, but maybe also of older furnishings, I don't know. But I like the smell, and this smells of it. So this was a 70s city car. What I'm in, it's proper urban retro. So 1169cc, I think this one is, so that's what, a 1.2 litre. Now the difference with the Civic compared to previous little city cars was this didn't have sporting pretensions. If you've watched my previous video on my Honda S600, which is one of their first cars, one of Honda's first ever cars, that had more sporty ambitions. This doesn't have sporty ambitions. This has just sheer practicality. That's why the tagline of this car when it was new was gets you where you want to go. The new Honda Civic gets you where you want to go. Full stop. They really played it down, and of course there was a lot of prejudice in that time, the 70s. People didn't want to buy Japanese products. Western people, Americans, British, they really didn't want to buy it. They still wanted to buy British. They still thought British cars were best. And as we realised at the time, in the mid-70s, were British cars best? Unlikely. Oh, I've just turned the hazards on. What a fail. The Civic was not a sports car. Honda's earlier car efforts were mostly sporty, like the little S800s and S600s. The cars that came before this, though, city cars, the Z600, the N600, they were front-wheel drive, front engine, not sporty. This was an overhead cam, all-alloy engine, either a 1200 like this or a 1500cc. But the thing about it was it was sold as a car that was thrifty, and it was really reliable, and that was it. You get in it, you drive it, you don't care about it, but it's fine, it keeps going. Visibility is amazing because of these thin pillars, and of course the car is so much smaller. But going back to that, this was not a micro car. This was a car you could take the kids to school in. This was a car that you had a reasonable sized boot, and Honda made a point of saying, yeah, this is not quirky, this is just quite straight, but very reliable and well appointed. Still got my Hitachi radio there, my push knob radio. Everything else looks so much bigger, even Minis and Honda Jazzes, and park this next to a new Civic. Well, the new Civic is 2 segments bigger. But going back in time, early to mid-70s, Britain was in a bad place. 1975, over 1 million people were unemployed. Sports car sales were nosediving. People wanted cars that were thrifty and practical and jolly. And this offered that. This car conquered the United States. Was it just good timing? Lucky timing? When it came out in 72, the oil crisis was in 73. The Honda E coming out now at a time when piston cars are being increasingly outlawed from urban spaces, and we're in the middle of, a bit of a global situation. Is history sort of repeating itself? And the reliance on oil is needing to become less and less. There's a need for us to rely less on oil. There's a choke there. Look. Younger viewers won't really know what a choke is, but when the car's cold, you pull it out. Give the car more fuel and less air. And when it warms up, you give it less fuel and more air. Where is the new, technologically advanced Honda E? Of course, it's got tech all across this dash here, the faux wood bit of the dash. The 70s Civic doesn't have a great deal going on. It doesn't even have a cigarette lighter. And a couple of cubbies and a little push-button radio, Hitachi radio. So I thought it's encouraging you to enjoy this lounge space. The Honda E's got all the little games, the aquariums, but I've brought this along, which I thought would be a little bit more of the period. All I've got to do is remember where to turn it on. Oh, hang on. Here we go. Here we go. I thought I'd enjoy a bit of PACMAN. I got this at Christmas. It's surprisingly hard. This was back in the early days of arcades. I think PACMAN came out in 80, so it would have been second generation Civic, strictly speaking. But let's not dwell on the details, shall we? It'll rev up to 5,500 RPM, which isn't high for a Honda engine, but this engine was different. This wasn't a two-cylinder car like its predecessors, like the Z600 and the N600, which were funky but less successful. This was four-cylinder, front-wheel drive, front-engined, and available from launch, I believe, in a four-door saloon or hatch. So lots of choices for the consumer. Do you know what, the brakes are really good actually. The brakes are better than I was expecting. Normally old cars really show their age with the braking system, but this is not. Hear a bit of transmission whine. For me, this is it. By day, during the normal days and the normal commutes, you drive an EV, let's say the Honda E, and then for the thing that you have in the garage to tinker with and use on occasional summer days and weekends, that's a classic. And I see this as a fantastic two-car garage. Your old school Civic in Carnaby yellow, and your charged yellow Honda E to do the daily duties, the practicality, your less polluty but highly luxurious stuff. And that's the thing, both of these cars are brimming with character. Oh, I think we're getting into a 1970s housing estate. This is prime Mark 1 Civic territory. So the Mark 1 Civic ended production in '79, which was the year I came into the world. But I remember seeing so many of these around as a kid, and I love the first generation pre-facelift has those little indicators on the top of the chrome bumpers. I really like them. I've nearly bought one of these so many times. Those headrests, which are so far down there, they're almost pointless. And even if you adjust it, I think it's still kind of pointless. Yes. Oh, damn you, traction control. I've been looking forward to this because although I've driven the Honda E on its original world launch, and as I said, that's been my most successful video to date, I haven't driven it in the UK. And that's what I wanted to do in this video. I wanted to drive it in the UK, explore the performance a little bit more, not drive it in torrential rain, and jump in and out of the original first gen Civic. Because this car, Honda have always said, is for a more urban-centric kind of owner-driver, which is why they say the 35.5 kilowatt-hour battery pack is the size that it is. They haven't chased a big range with the Honda E. Have they made a mistake with that? Well, on paper, it's worse than almost every one of its peers in terms of range. And on performance, it's kind of in the middle, really. So you decide. But what I would say is, from a car enthusiast point of view and an EV enthusiast point of view, for me, getting back in it reassures me that it's still an exciting, fantastic car. I don't want to like it as much as I do because of its failings on paper, because the range is average at best. But yet here I am, back in the E, enjoying this lovely cabin, enjoying the sumptuous quality of it all. I mean, it feels like a very well put together car. It feels expensive because it is more expensive than the likes of the electric up and the Mini E and the Zoe. Yeah, but it's, I don't know, this feels extra special. Whereas other EVs in this kind of range you might tire of over time, or they might turn to just becoming kind of a white good car. There's something extra. There's something extra about the E, the Honda E. It's just, it's characterful. Now, I have been driving this car. I got the car at 99% of charge. It's now at 67, and I've probably done about 40 miles actually. What I would say is, as suspected when I first tested the E, is that it is conservative with its range. It started off saying you had 98 miles of range, which is like, oh, that doesn't sound great. And yet I drove it 18 miles and it had 96 or 95 miles of range. So you go, hang on, I've done 15 miles and it's used 4 miles of range apparently. So I actually think it's a more efficient beast than it lets on. Obviously that depends on how you drive it, blah, blah, blah. Temperature, blah. Aircon, blah. So this particular one is the range topping advanced model, which Honda thinks will be the most popular pack. It has some extra tech on it and it'll do a second to 62 quicker, which is 8 seconds rather than 9 seconds to 62. So it's not as quick as the Mini E, and it probably doesn't corner quite as well as the Mini E. This one's in charge yellow. You can get it in crystal meth blue and some other colours. The white. I think the best two colours are the white and the charge yellow, even though I'm sure this yellow isn't actually yellow. I think it's very light green, but maybe that's my colour blindness getting the better of me. Honda have brought out some really innovative, strange, almost lost leading cars in the past. One of those being the first gen Insight. And I kind of liken this to that. And the Insight's now regarded as such a, I don't know, a tour de force, a forward-thinking future classic. I think this is going to be an instant cult car. People are intrigued by it, which is why it gets so many hits on things like YouTube and on Instagram, because people love the way it looks. It's an interesting piece of design. What I do wish with the Honda E is A, that it wasn't just called the Honda E, because that's too safe and boring, especially with Corsa E coming out and other E cars, E-Golf, having already been there. And the other thing is, I wish they brought out 2 choices of battery pack size. A bit like the Hyundai and Kia. This one's the only one you can get, 35.5 kilowatt hours, which is small. 125. I don't doubt the fact you can get 125 miles of range out of her. I don't doubt that, actually. What I do wonder is whether that will put a lot of people off, especially for the money. But this is where it's kind of at home, going through little towns and villages. Look, there's a kid there that was just transfixed by it, and I think it does have that. It does have that eye-grabbing tendency. But I love its suspension, and I love its refined quietness. It does feel like a more refined, luxurious spec car. I've tried to find its rear-wheel drive traction control, but I don't think you can turn it off, which is a shame, because it would be great to explore the rear-wheel driveness in combination with the amazing steering lock. But alas, I think you can't. You can put it in sport mode. There. Yeah. Are they going to bring out a Type R version? Because then that might... I mean, that would be very cool. Tesla has its ludicrous mode and has its performance pack and all that stuff. Should Honda have the E-Type R, it would be fantastic. Following some very interesting airbrushing on a Mercedes van, and the number plate says knob. Notice the old Civic, the first gen Civic, has like a bonnet bulge, like a little muscle car with some nostril vents at the side. Great little bonnet design. And this has its almost little muscle car shaker hood with the hole cut out for the charge port, which I still think will be problematic in snow and very heavy rain, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's go round a roundabout really fast. Yeah. I'm going to go around this big roundabout quite fast because I want to feel how the Honda E behaves. I can hear the ABS tickling me. Well, it's very flat. I wanted to do a bit of performance driving with it because I've not had a chance. But I think this could be a really interesting car to drive quick on the back lanes. I think it could be way more entertaining than people realise. It could also be a contender up against the Mini E in terms of, like, you know, B-road tomfoolery. Well, what do we have here? Well, all of this gubbins under the bonnet of the Honda E isn't the engine. This is the inverter and other EV related matters like the cooling, because the battery pack lives under the floor and it's rear wheel drive, so the motor's back there. But this bit in the middle, of course, is that really slick charging port which sits in that hole in the bonnet. And you can charge this CCS up to 100 kilowatts rapid charge, so it'll rapid charge from 0 to 80% in half an hour at up to 100 kilowatts. 35.5 kilowatt hour battery pack. At home, in your wall charger, it's a 4-hour charge to fully charge the car. This is the Honda E's 0 to 60. Okay, we've got it in sport. Yeah, ready? Foot planted. 62. Now, in the same way that the Nissan Zoe is not like a real heavy hitter in the performance stakes, I just don't mind, because the throttle response is there, look, when you want it to be. It's punchy in that respect. It's not a drag car. I think this is more of a corners car than a drag car. Definitely. What I want to do more than anything is for cars like the electric Mini to bring non-EV enthusiasts into this world of appreciation of EVs. And I want the Seat Me, and I want the VW Up to do the same. And I want the ID Buzz to come along and grab everyone's attention into EVs. And I think this is one of those cars. This is going to be one of those kind of calling cards in the EV world, because it proves that you can have an exceptionally interestingly designed car that just happens to be electric. As I said right at the top of this video, I'm not going to do a direct comparison between old and new because it's just wrong. It's not accurate. This was more a nostalgic piece, and to remind ourselves of how important this car is, and to also remind ourselves that the new version of that isn't really the current Civic, it's actually this. It really is the Honda E. The other thing this is reminding me of is that car doesn't drive and feel as old as it is. And that car, despite being beaten on paper by almost all of its peers for the money that you pay for it, it still makes me want it. I still desire it, I still think it's beautifully made, and I still think it's an absolute character of a car. Damn it. Thank you for watching Car Pervert. As usual, if you're not a subscriber already, please hit the subscribe button, like this video if you've enjoyed it, and if you're a Patreon, thank you so much for supporting this channel through Patreon. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there is a link in the description. Thanks a lot.